Hello and welcome to the Beyond Limits podcast. I'm Jermaine Benjamin, one of the directors at Transition Partners, and this podcast is where we invite leaders from the talent, HR and culture sphere to discuss everything to do with attracting, retaining and developing people. Lynne, thank you. Thank you very much for joining me today for my Beyond Limits podcast.
You're welcome, I think.
I know it's a little out of your comfort zone, should we say.
A lot, yeah.
But I appreciate it, so thank you very much. Really, I suppose, just for, by way of introduction, I know you've worked in talent for some time. I won't say how long. But it'd be really, really useful if you could give us a bit of an introduction to your experience and your journey in talent.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been working in talent and HR now for 21 years. I did an international business degree management course at Staffordshire University, and part of my course was to do an industrial placement year. Okay. And I went to Chorus Engineering Steels as a personnel assistant. Right. In fact, my first day at Chorus Engineering Steels, I had to drive through the picket line they'd announced some redundancies, and I had to drive through the picket line my first day in the job.
Was that your introduction?
That was my introduction to the working world.
Right.
So yeah, broad shoulders. But ultimately kind of started in personnel, obviously transitioned into kind of HR as it was and stuff and everything. Worked at a few companies including the BBC. But the type of industries I've been involved with, I was involved in a lot of redundancy conversations. Right. Okay. And ultimately kind of found myself always pushing to get involved more in the recruitment side of things. So when I was at Chorus, I got involved in their graduate recruitment, various kind of roles got kind of pushed to get involved in that side. And then at the BBC, obviously with it being a massive organisation and having a huge recruitment team, I took the opportunity to apply for a role to kind of move into the recruitment side of things, and my career kind of went from there really. So I've not stepped outside of recruitment since kind of joining recruitment at the BBC. I've moved around some really good companies and some big name companies, both either UK based or globally based, and had an opportunity to work with and for some brilliant people. And then 2 years ago made the decision to shake things up a little bit and move into a bit more of a kind of startup scale up business, obviously being Hippo Digital, and that's where I am now and enjoying life.
Brilliant. And we spoke about this individually on a couple of occasions. You mentioned it this morning about the move from kind of corporate to startup scale up. What prompted that move for you? To be absolutely truthful, I think I probably felt a little bit stuck in a rut really. I was part of it. It was the same old conversation time and time again, and you know, you learn a lot within the big corporate organisations, and you know, there's some really interesting things to work on and be part of. But I felt as if I wanted to challenge myself a little bit more, and that meant stepping outside of what I knew, what I was comfortable with, going into something much smaller and being part of the growth journey, the growth trajectory and so on. So I suppose it was to some extent wanting a bit of a career change, but not wanting to necessarily change what I was actually doing, just who I was doing it for. Different environment.
And it's been really interesting and actually probably more exciting because of the I say kind of the growth side of things, and knowing how you truly impact that. When you work in a big organisation, you sometimes feel as if you're part of this kind of
like a
cog in the wheel kind of
thing.
But you know, the company I'm working for now and the role that I'm in and the team that I'm with, you feel like you're very much influencing things.
See the day-to-day impacts of what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And why? So you started kind of personnel HR. Why did you feel led to move more into that talent, more into that recruitment side of things? Because HR is pretty broad, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I suppose it's kind of working, I suppose as you enter into the world of work and you're getting to know yourself a little bit more within the working environment, I think you kind of start to understand a bit more of your strengths and maybe the things, not necessarily the weaknesses, but things that you don't quite enjoy as much. And probably relationships first, and I feel as if that's kind of one of my major strengths, that I build relationships well with people. And you know, I like to enable people's career journeys, as opposed to part of that conversation sadly where you're possibly letting people go or dismissing people from the organisation. So it's not that, you know, I can't do that, but it's just not something I particularly found much job satisfaction from doing for me personally. So I suppose having had the opportunity to be involved in certain things quite early on in my career meant that I felt as if I could make quite an informed decision about where I wanted to be and where ultimately kind of what got me up in the morning to kind of feel as if I was enjoying going to work.
And then bringing it down to kind of what you're doing now at Hippo, give us a bit of a flavour of what you're doing, or what you and the team are doing at Hippo or differently or uniquely to attract talent into the business, or
so I think the word differently is probably a bit of a misleading one, because I don't think we necessarily do anything differently, because I suppose recruitment is recruitment at the end of the day. But I suppose what the focus is, which maybe kind of talking to other recruiters and going to various events, I kind of realise maybe we are a slightly different focus, is we are relationship first. You know, Hippo is a user-centred design company, and I think this is where we kind of fall neatly in with one another in that, you know, we take a very human-centric approach to what we do, both as a business and from a recruitment point of view. I think it's about not being overly concerned with technology and automation. Obviously those things have their place in recruitment and they're enablers in many cases, but I think within recruitment you have to be able to build a rapport with someone, you have to be able to understand what they're looking for as well as what we might be looking for as the recruiter, and acknowledge when it is or it isn't the right fit for both the company and that person, and allow, you know, provide as much information as possible for people to make informed decisions on you as much as you're making informed decisions on the other person. So I think we just take a very honest, kind of relationship-focused approach to it. Spend a lot of time in informal conversations before we even contemplate kind of moving things forward into interviews and so on. I suppose we also try to make sure that our recruitment process is quite speedy. So there's that balance of informal conversations and formal conversations, moving people through as quickly as possible, because there's a really competitive market out there.
Absolutely.
And I think, you know, some of what we hear within the marketplace of what our competitors are sometimes doing is, you know, throwing in quite onerous processes and stuff and everything.
Absolutely.
Again, it's about what's going to gain the buy-in from the candidates, and what do we need to find out in order to be able to make an informed decision and to make them want to come and join us if that's the right thing to do. You know, making sure we're adapting the process as well to individuals, because everyone's got their own accessible needs or kind of wants and so on and everything. So we just keep things really flexible and keep things down to conversation to make sure that we get from A to B in the right way.
Do you feel that that relationship culture, do you feel, and I was probably going to say how, do you get that into your interviews? Are you able to get that into your interviews, that kind of relationship culture, and build that relationship in a short period of time? Because that interview period, it's you know, you're in an interview for an hour or half an hour. Do you feel that comes across?
I think maybe within the actual kind of formal interview side of it, which typically within Hippo will be a 90-minute conversation. It might consist of a presentation, or it might consist of a coding kind of challenge, but still part of the conversation. But I think it probably is maybe a little bit more challenging to keep the rapport and engagement going as part of that, because there is a formality to it naturally. And you know, but I suppose what we find is that we do interview training with people, and you tend to get some people who are more naturally aligned to that type of setting, can still kind of bring across personality at the same time. You can have a conversation. And it does take a bit of training and support to kind of enable people to be that way. But I think because of the way that we approach the recruitment, by the time anyone is getting to that process, they'll have had a number informal conversations of getting to know either myself or one of the team or even one of our suppliers to, you know, hopefully include yourselves, you know, very much under the skin of Hippo to understand, you know, what we're looking for and to kind of make sure that everyone's bought in. By the time the candidate's moving through to more formal conversation, you understand that ultimately that's their opportunity to now demonstrate their skills in a bit more of a detailed way and to kind of, you know, demonstrate their value add through the presentation and so on. But they're kind of very much, hopefully they've got a lot of their Q&A covered by that stage.
They've had enough touch points before to get that relationship element across.
And we also make sure afterwards that if the candidate feels if they've not had enough time to maybe ask any further questions, that we build in a second stage as necessary, which sometimes isn't for us, it's for the candidate.
I love the idea of the flexibility and adjusting to candidates' needs. I think that's really, really important.
We have certain we have a touch point of certain things that need to have happened. The rest of it will be what it needs to be. Because it's a really competitive environment that we're up against some brilliant competitors. It's not as if we think we're shoulders above everyone else. We know we've got some brilliant competitors, and it's about just making sure that the candidate understands enough about us in order to feel that they're making informed decisions for them. And if they choose that now's not the right time for them, that's not a case of burning any bridges with us. It's just a case of, you know, good luck in your next career move and keep the door wide open for the future.
Yeah, brilliant. And in particular, one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the podcast, and one of the themes around the people we're having on this podcast, and certainly a value that's dear to me, is that authenticity, like being able to be yourself. You know, I don't necessarily want these discussions to be corporate or you know, and so that's one of the reasons I wanted for you to come and join us. But thinking about the role that you're doing now, thinking about branding, interviewing, outreaching to attract talent, how can we get that authenticity ingrained in that process and how we talk about our organisations to attract talent?
I think
that's a difficult question, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think it's, you know, you need to truly understand your brand and what your offering is, and you need to make sure that what you're representing externally is truthful.
And what's going on internally.
And you know, and part of the conversation I have with candidates an awful lot of times is maybe the things that they might not like about us, or the things that they might find challenging about coming to work for us, because they're going to find that out anyway.
Absolutely.
If you don't share it, and then they come, you know, they're expecting one thing and you're another, that will all come to the fore within probably a matter of weeks, at which point you've then got a problem on your hands, because you've got a person who's obviously disengaged and not happy with the choices that they made, and you know, and so I think part of the kind of authenticity in terms of attracting the right candidates is to be honest about what you're great at, but maybe also some of the problems and some of the challenges. And I think it's about sharing the journey that you're on as well, because a lot of companies talk about their EVPs and so on, but sometimes you've got an aspirational EVP. You know, no one's really standing still.
What do you mean by that?
So I suppose what I mean by that is, you know, you've got your proposition, which is this is who we are now. And you need to be able to sell that across in an authentic way. But in Hippo and actually in many other companies I've worked for, you've got the journey, and so your EVP's never going to stay the same. You might have, you know, I find a lot of times that leadership of companies have a different expectation of the EVP versus what the EVP in reality is. And part of that is actually because they're trying to reach over here when actually you're currently here. And I think it's joining the dots between the two things and helping people to see how they can be part of that future EVP and how they can help us to get there. You know, if you're on a bit of a culture change, if you're growing and trying to retain your culture as you grow, if you looking at your benefits, if you're looking at the type of work that you do and the even your policies and so on, it's all transitional, and you need to be clear as to what that looks like to someone to help them to see whether or not they want to be part of that.
That's interesting.
So if you know you're going to change, be honest about what that change looks like, and you know, aspirational EVP gives some people something to recognise and understand, to make an informed decision as to whether they're
the
part of
direction
that.
you're going in, and you mentioned something interesting there about employees being part of that journey. How do you feel that we can do that or maximise that, having people part of that journey of where we are now to where we can get to, and getting the staff involved? I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's about open, honest communication. And you know, in Hippo we have lots of different groups for lots of people within the organisation, different interests, different backgrounds, different experiences, and you know, we have kind of communities of people, and we engage with those communities to enable us to make the right decisions.
Can you give us an example of one of the communities? That's interesting.
So we have a community of people who recognise themselves as having a disability or being an ally of someone with a disability. We have the same for people from different ethnic backgrounds, people who recognise themselves as LGBTQ+, and so on. So we when we're looking at things that we can do as a company, we engage with those communities to make those decisions. Because it's hard to, I suppose, make decisions if you're not on behalf of communities, if you're not part of that community, and you need to understand what it is, you know, people expect and look for. And you know, I find certainly is, you know, working in recruitment, that you know, often it's not just about salary and title these days. It's about actually, you know, what's your company doing for the community, and you know, what's your policy on diversity recruitment and so on.
Absolutely.
So you need to have open communications, because you need to engage people in the organisation about the development of those type of strategies and things that you're going to do as a company, and actually that then gets people more engaged to want to be part of that journey with you. People, if you just do two people, it tends not to go down quite as well, and you might miss some things. And you know, these things, they take time. And I think if people recognise that you're trying to do the right thing and they're trying to take the right steps, then again they want to be part of the support of that. But if you don't engage, people think that you're either hiding something or you're not doing something.
And do you feel that communication and engagement with interested parties or stakeholders, have you found that has helped to, you know, move the business forward towards that EVP agenda?
Yeah, definitely. And not just, I suppose, not just about kind of the EVP agenda, but just generally in every scenario. We've just reached over 250 people as an organisation, so we're looking at kind of various reports that we now have to complete in regard to the equal pay and so on. And you know, we have to engage with the business over that in terms of how we fill in those reports and the different expectations of that. And the engagement in early communications of what is required and how we're going to get there is key to achieving a really good outcome. And we've got, you know, lots of really good ideas and solutions coming forward from, you know, everyone across at all levels of the business.
People feel comfortable to be involved and voice their opinion.
Based on their experiences and you know their own communities and what you know, they're almost educating the leadership of the business.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I like that. And so, switching back to talent, you mentioned around it's a very competitive market. I think we're all feeling that in all spheres. What do you feel is the biggest challenge to attracting talent, and what are some of the bits and pieces that we can do to stand out or to have a bit of a competitive advantage?
I think
that's a difficult question.
Yeah,
really difficult,
and I'm just double checking my notes because I almost kind of saw this question. There was kind of lots of kind of thoughts around it in answers and loads of things.
There's no silver bullet per se, is
no,
there?
And everyone's always looking for that silver bullet, and I learned a long time ago that silver bullet does not exist, regardless of the amount of events you go to and different tools and things that people share. There is absolutely no silver bullet.
It's almost concerning if somebody's like, oh, this is the answer, isn't it? You know?
And I think that's sometimes where you can feel as if you're failing actually as well, because you know, everyone's always talking about these different things that they're using, and you think, well, should I be doing that? But actually, I think there's a number of different ways to answer this. I think the first thing is back to the silver bullet things, that there is no one size fits all solution. Every company has its individual challenges. Every company struggles with the competitiveness of the market for different reasons. And I think internally one of the answers is about finding the right size solutions that don't just do something because you can, do something because it's the right thing to do. You know, understand
the right thing to do for the organisation and the teams and.
Right thing to do. I mean, hopefully the right solution should be right for the company, should be right for the team, should be right for the candidate. And it's hard to kind of meet all those requirements at the same time. But I suppose it's the right size solution. You know, you've got, every company's got its own budgets. It's got, you know, you've got various things that you kind of need to meet up to. So the first thing is to find your right size solutions and don't beat your head around, don't beat yourself up over the things that you can't do or you're not ready for as a company. I think sell the culture, I think, is the most genuinely authentic thing you can do in order to manage some of the competitiveness within the market at the moment, is just be honest about who you are and what it is you're doing and what it is you're achieving.
And I suppose if you're doing that around the culture and you're talking about, shouting about it, you're going to attract people who are interested in that culture. Exactly.
And then I suppose that does support the challenge of the competitiveness, because, you know, we're in the digital sector. You know, we live and operate in Leeds. It's, you know, we know just how competitive it is around here, and nationwide. And these days, you're not just competing regionally; you're competing nationally as well.
With the remote working and hybrid,
So to be selling that culture is, as you say, it means that the right people come to have a conversation with you, and you know, and by that time, they're engaged in who you are and what you're about. You know, Hippo is very much around meaningful and impactful work and impacting society in a good way in terms of the work that we deliver on behalf of our clients. And we find that people really engage heavily with that because they want to be proud of what they do, and they want to be able to talk to their family and friends about what they do, and to know that they've, you know, worked on something that's really beneficial.
The work is just beyond here and now. It's having a wider impact.
So I think that overcomes some of the challenges around competition, simply because of who we are and what we do, and it's pushing that message out in the right way. Again, being honest about the things that we're not great at. I'll be the first to admit the flaws, but we're working on those. We recognise them and we're working on them. You know, I'd say there's some basics for competition. You know, things like advertising the salary. You know, just simple things like that. You should. I think I understand the reasons why companies don't, because internal politics and various issues, certainly within larger organisations, as to why it's a bit of a contentious issue to advertise salary. But I think, you know, all the data tells you that candidates prefer a role to have an advertised salary.
Absolutely.
So if you can, you should. Obviously, we're lucky within Hippo that we can. We're really open about it, and we'll continue to be open about it. And I think it does. It saves people's time. If they're not interested in that salary band, if they're looking for something more than that, then they're not going to apply. And I'd much rather that than waste someone's time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I do think it's part of the authentic conversation in reality. And you know, it's really uncomfortable for a candidate to ask a potential employer, what's the salary? They don't like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because I suppose you're thinking, there's a perception that they will think that employers just think it's about the money. Yeah. But actually, it's your livelihood.
Yeah, exactly. It's basics, isn't it? We've all got mortgages or rents and stuff like that, and everything. You know, we've all got baseline of what we can afford. So it is. I find it odd when people think by asking about salary, you're salary motivated. You're not. You're just making sure that you can cover.
Absolutely. And if you're on a certain salary, you know, you want to be compensated relative to what you've been on, and
So I do think it's important. I understand the reasons why some companies don't, but I certainly strongly believe that if you can, you should.
Okay, and then just kind of pivoted into careers. What do Hippo do around career development, support of career ambitions?
So we have a skills framework. So within further consultants, which is the bulk of our employees, we have a skills framework, and ultimately that kind of takes you through all the different requirements at all the different levels of consultancy. So you can see
what the difference is between being an intermediate consultant is to being a senior consultant, all the different kind of behaviours expected and consultancy skills expected at that job level in order to be able to kind of develop and move on.
Okay. Is that kind of competencies and
yeah,
they're related to those levels?
It's a mix of things, but
Right.
ultimately it's kind of also what we use to decide if and when we're recruiting someone based on, you know, do they meet the requirements of that of the framework?
Yeah. Okay.
And obviously then there's kind of development within that framework. So we recently introduced line management. Sounds odd to say we recently introduced it, but remember we're only small and it's part of kind of the growth journey.
Yeah.
So line management's now in that journey.
How's that gone down then internally?
I think generally very well. I'll be honest, I'm obviously not people services, so I'm not quite as close to it. But I think, you know, people appreciate, you know, that those one-to-ones. We've invested in a tool in order to construct one-to-ones and make sure that they're taking place at a regular,
Right.
at a regular time, and just to make sure that people are engaging frequently about conversations for development. We actually offer promotion 4 times a year. So there's 4 different points in the year when people can receive promotion.
Oh, wow.
And we do salary reviews twice a year. And, you know, ultimately we're a consultancy. People, you know, our clients are paying for our services and they expect us to be good at what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want our employees to remain stagnant. We want them to continually developing. But it's about what development we can offer them, as well as the development they take on for themselves. You know, we've within Hippo, a lot of people are really passionate about what they do because of the services that we offer and the things that we do. So, you know, I've certainly seen many people treat it as a hobby as much as a career, and, you know, they go and get involved in many things outside of work that are related to work itself. And it's that self-development side of things as well. That means that people kind of progress well within the organisation. So we've got so many different case studies of when people have developed their careers throughout the organisation. We obviously started the academy January last year, so we've now got a lot of kind of, you know, entry-level people coming in, and they need support and mentorship as well. So, you know, we kind of identify the people who are going to kind of mentor them through their roles.
I know we didn't mention this prior to the podcast, but tell us a little bit about the academy, because that's really interesting. What's happening at Hippo?
Yeah, so the academy it's not a new initiative necessarily. It is something that some of the big consultancies have already done before. But it is something that was important for us to give people an entry point into the company. I suppose sometimes people think of the academy as actually at entry level. It isn't just entry level. You could argue that someone in a senior position could go onto the academy, but about their kind of future development and so on. Exactly. Yeah. But ultimately what we've done so far is kind of been advertising roles to bring people in, maybe kind of who aren't working in a consultancy environment, maybe have develop some skills within a particular profession, but have the right attitude for what we do. And then we teach them all the elements of user-centered design. We teach them, you know, about working in government. We teach them about working in agile ways and stuff. And so we put in a lot of kind of coaching and development, and they'll be non-billable for a period of time before they start to kind of transition onto billable work, but continue to be mentored and supported. So it allows people to career change over. And I suppose, you know, people might see getting into this type of sector quite difficult if they're not already in it.
Absolutely.
So you know, if we're doing it and other consultancies doing similar things, then it builds up the talent pool for people to be in the sector, and creates more work for people to develop their careers further. And we found it to be really successful. We've got some, you know, the way that people have embraced the academy and are progressive now is brilliant. And we'll continue to do more of them. The first one we ran was quite profession agnostic, really. We kind of recruited a number of different people across a range of different professions. The couple that we've done afterwards have been a bit more focused on a particular profession.
Right.
And that's based on what work we could see coming in the future and stuff, and where we may be struggling to recruit at more kind of experience levels. So we kind of want to develop our own kind of pipeline of talent.
I love that, because there's so much talk of skills shortages.
Yeah.
So, Lynne, in terms of your advice and what you've seen in the past, what do you think are some of the pitfalls or mistakes maybe that organisations do or talent teams do when recruiting?
I think the biggest one for me is being so focused on the need to hire that you forget that it's a two-way decision.
Okay.
I think sometimes it's really easy to just get into the mindset of I've got this many roles to fill and just to focus on finding people and ultimately talking them into an opportunity. And whereas or you just selling the role, not matching the candidate to the role, but selling the role.
Kind of square pegging around.
And then you get to the very end and the candidate maybe has another offer on the table or is interviewing elsewhere and they're choosing the company over you. And you're shocked and horrified as to why they've chosen to do that. The reality is you've never actually had a conversation with them about what they're looking for to kind of get to the point where they're wanting to join. And it's a two-way decision, and so many people forget that over time and focus on the fact that we just need to hire someone and make it one way, so it's all about us rather than about the candidates. I think that's massive, to be honest, and I think that's about rapport building, back to kind of
the
relationships
element,
and so on. I think again maybe kind of ignoring some red flags as well as about the need to hire. So you've
that's
got
a big one.
There's gut instinct. There's a lot to be said for gut instinct.
Absolutely agree.
But again, are we always honest about the gut instinct when we know there's a need to hire and do it, and do we just pretend it's not there and hope to God that this will work?
Absolutely,
and
when there's that pressure of meeting an objective, these requirements to fill and these deadlines with an end client, and
I've worked in this certainly isn't the case for Hippo, but I've worked in other organisations where it does become a bit bums on seats, and you kind of get your pat on the back for having hired so many people. But what you're not looking at is what the retention rate of those people were, or what happened to them afterwards, and are they actually happy? I think it's you need to really want to. I think you need to step back from it and enable your company to succeed, and part of that is hiring the right people for the right reasons, and being honest when it's not going to work, and take your time over it, and not be concerned about, I say people get tied up in not saying time to high data and stuff like that and everything, but don't just do things because it makes the data look good, because there's other problems that will surface as a result of that. So I think that's a major one. Again, I think lengthy interview processes are huge. Again, it's all about, we want to find out this from the candidates, so we'll make you jump through this many hoops because you should want to join us, and we're going to test you to the nth degree. Forgetting the fact that is that giving the candidate the right impression and so on and so forth. And actually, if your process is twice as long as the competitor's process, and so that candidate gets another midway through, then you've lost your candidate. So you need to right size everything all the time. And then the other thing I'd say again is don't get too lost in the automation of things. That tools and automation, everything. It's all brilliant. It's all fantastic. There's pretty much a tool for every problem that exists out there now. Doesn't necessarily mean to say that you need that tool or solution. And just think about what your business needs from you. Think about the business needs, the business strategy, and align what you're doing to that. Not just because you went to that event yesterday and someone showed this big fancy expensive tool, cost you about $100,000 to have it, so you can sell it in and do all pretty things. But ultimately, if that means that your cost per hire is now enormous, then it's probably not the right thing to be doing. So I say just really kind of focus on, is what you're doing in line with the business need, and you might evolve it over time because as your business gets bigger and more complex, there's more things that you need to do and so on. But I think sometimes you can get caught up in looking around at what other people are doing as opposed to focusing on what's right for your business and what the candidates.
Thank you for listening to the Beyond Limits podcast. If you have any questions that we can answer at all on the podcast going forward, or if you would be interested in being a guest on the podcast, please email me directly at jermaine.benjamin@transition-partners.co.uk. Thanks again.